Tell us.
I'm Arthur,
Mhm.
Arthur Shi,
Mhm.
and I'm a senior right now studying computer science here
Mhm.
at Michigan.
Cool.
So I got involved in entrepreneurial stuff kind of early. I did Empowered my freshman year,
Cool.
and since then I've kind of been involved in a bunch of stuff with the CFE and Ann Arbor, so it's been great.
When you hear the question, what do you do? What would you say?
Um, I would say I do computer stuff mostly now, so software, and I'm kind of getting interested in how do you do really big problems with software, so the challenges of doing something just like for one person's app versus doing it for like millions of users at once is like they're very
Right.
different challenges. So that's kind of the stuff I'm trying to learn about.
Right.
And then in terms of the business side too, I really think it's interesting to think about the strategy of like why are companies making the decisions they're doing, and like even if you have software engineers, which is kind of my work, like
Right.
how do you decide what the company needs to build and like where that fits into bigger plans.
Totally.
So thinking about that kind of stuff is
Interesting.
what I'd say I do right now.
Cool. So your traditional training is in software.
Mhm.
How have you learned about the business side and the human side of stuff, or how do you want to learn more about that?
Yeah, I guess probably most of my exposure to that stuff came from Empowered my freshman year. That was really before I knew I wanted to do software stuff. At
Right.
that time I thought I wanted to be a doctor,
Oh.
and then Orgo 1 was not very interesting to me, so I was like, maybe I should move.
I didn't
But-
know you were. I didn't know you were.
Yeah,
pre-med.
I was pre-med when I first came.
Oh wow.
And then
Okay.
I did Empowered, and that was kind of my first exposure to entrepreneurial stuff, where we were just coming up with like a vision for our project and
Mhm.
thinking about what kind of things need to happen for us to execute on that vision.
Right.
Learning how to reach out to people either through an introduction or cold email, cold calling, whatever.
Right.
And starting to get some relationships, learning how to talk about like, this is what we're trying to do, this is how you can help us, here's what's in it for you, that type of presenting value and just, yeah, like making stuff happen.
Right.
That was really cool. I enjoyed that because it's not something I'd ever done before college.
Mhm.
And then starting from sophomore year is when I started to really get serious about computer science stuff in school.
Right.
And then after that, like I started doing some coding internships,
Mhm.
and that was kind of where and my classes started getting harder, so that was kind of where the technical skills came from.
Right.
And then after my sophomore year, I worked for an early stage startup called My Swim Pro here in Ann Arbor. And that was definitely my most like practical experience of just like having to work with the co-founders and understand like how are they thinking about the business.
Right.
And like for me having a fresh pair of eyes, like what do I have to learn from them? What might I be able to bring that they've kind of just like haven't thought about it that way.
How big was that company when you worked there?
Oh, it was 4 people. There was 3 co-founders, a part-time remote guy, and then me. So
Wow.
really small.
Did you like that setup?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great. I think just being able to ask questions like, hey, I know some users want this feature, and I'm working on this feature like this week maybe,
Mhm.
but then being able to take that right back to the co-founders and be like, okay, so we're building this feature instead of this other one that we're thinking about, like, why are we prioritizing it that way? And they would explain to me like, oh, based on like the users we've talked to, a lot of them say, I am a premium subscriber right now, for example, and
Right.
these are the things that make it worth it for me, or
Mhm.
like I'm not a premium subscriber yet, but if I had this, I would do it.
Right.
And so just learning like, especially when you have so limited resources in an early stage company,
Prioritize it.
yeah, knowing how to prioritize and like what is gonna help you build up like your revenue in the future, or what's gonna help you grow your number of users. So like always forward thinking, not just like crossing tasks off the list like without any real reasoning, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So, and then you had a very different experience, I'm assuming, this past summer. So what'd you do
Yeah,
last summer?
that's right. So this past summer I was at Facebook, which is definitely not an early stage company.
Right.
They've got what, like tens of thousands of employees now.
Right.
And that was kind of interesting because I think on the software side of things, it was
Mhm.
really good for me. The technology at Facebook is amazing. Like they have so many talented, really experienced engineers.
Right.
And so the biggest difference I would say with a early stage tech company and like a big tech company with a lot of resources is at the bigger company, you're going to have more strict processes around like how do we make quality code, like how do we build this in a way that it's not just going to become a huge mess in the future, but it's like
Right.
easy to maintain.
More like standard operating
Exactly,
procedures.
yeah.
Okay.
Like there's kind of more standards for like your code should look like this. Like here's a bunch of tests you need to pass before you like ship it
Right.
and stuff like that. Whereas in the early stage company, it was very like, oh man, like we don't have time to test everything really thoroughly.
Let's just throw it up.
Let's just run it in the emulator and like run it through on our phones and be like, okay, that looks like it works correctly. Let's just send it. And then you find out later, like, oh, there were mistakes and like
Right.
weird interactions you didn't intend. But the pace and like the processes is one side of it. And then of course in the bigger company, you're not really going to be you're not going to be giving direct input into like executive decisions as an engineer.
Right.
Whereas when you have 5 people in the company, it doesn't matter what your job is, if like a big decision is being made, like everyone has a really important voice in that. So
Totally.
that's kind of something I missed working in a larger environment that I definitely like to have in the future.
Right. So those two experiences sort of, did they, like did you discover sort of more about yourself, what kind of culture you want to be a part of, what sort of workplace environment you like?
Yeah, I think for me the team at MySpin Pro was really what made the difference. I mean the business challenges were interesting and like
Right.
being able to work so closely with those even as like a product engineer
Right.
was amazing. But having that really tight-knit team where everyone of course knows each other super well, you're like working next to each other every day.
Right.
It really feels like a team, whereas at a larger organization, there's so many people involved in different components. Like you might know your team really well,
Right.
you might know some of the teams that work closely to your team pretty well,
Mm-hmm.
but beyond your organization,
Still
it definitely
work,
feels
yeah.
pretty detached from like what other organizations within the company are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably, I'm like kind of interested in doing something more in between, not so early and not so late.
Got it.
But there's like a point where the team, like the company starts as just a team,
Yeah.
and then it becomes like many teams, and then it becomes like many organizations.
Totally. It's just the nature of
So like where you are on that spectrum in the company's growth, like I think has a big effect on what your relationships will look like in
Right.
the sense that like when you're past like 100 or 200 people, it's gonna start to be really hard to just walk around and know everybody there
Totally.
really well.
Totally.
So.
I'm curious to know, so Facebook had a very public and political summer.
Yeah, they
So
did.
what was it like to be an intern there when all of that was going on? Did you get texts from people like,
Yeah,
hey,
yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's really funny. So I signed my offer to join them for the summer before Cambridge Analytica happened. So
Oh, okay.
Facebook was relatively unsmeared at that point.
Okay.
And then, and the big news broke about like the data scandal, and then my mom was like, "Oh my God, like, are you still gonna have your internship?" And I was like, "Yeah, Mom, it's okay."
That's so funny.
Yeah.
She texts you
Yeah,
like,
yeah. She's
should
like,
I be
"Oh,
worried?
yeah." I
Are
was
you
like,
unemployed?"
"It doesn't. I don't think it's that bad." So it's
Yeah.
really interesting. Actually, I think there was a point where, it wasn't that serious.
Mhm.
Cambridge Analytica was a big deal more because of the discussion that happened around data privacy and all that.
Sure.
But in terms of like the actual company's future, I mean, the way that a lot of people I knew were thinking about it was basically like, oh, Facebook stock is like 15% off, like it's on sale, you know, like it's
Yeah.
gonna come back.
Right.
And it did come back, and then a bunch more stuff happened, and now people are a little more hesitant about like how Facebook's doing.
Right.
But I think watching the company manage this kind of like crisis PR situation internally, like people had a lot of questions, and the company tried to be somewhat transparent. Like there would be, they have a thing where every Friday, like Mark Zuckerberg or like some other executive does like a 1-hour Q&A,
Oh, cool.
and employees can ask questions. So a lot of people had questions about like the data scandal and like, well, what is Facebook doing
Implications,
about this?
right.
What are the implications? In general, I don't think operationally like it had a really huge effect.
Mhm.
I think probably there was more stress for full-time employees whose like compensation packages are a lot more based in stocks.
Right.
So they're probably concerned a little bit.
Mhm.
I think overall Facebook still looked at itself as like we have a big vision for like connecting the world, and we're working on all these different services and products to do that.
Mhm.
I would say it still felt pretty optimistic, but
Cool.
those are definitely kinds of problems that you can see when a company gets to such a prominent level like Facebook, whereas
Right.
smaller companies, if they have a PR disaster, it's like, okay, the company is probably in trouble, but it's not like a worldwide discussion about like data privacy, so the
Right.
scale is different.
It's like if a tree falls in the forest and
Yeah.
no one's around to hear it.
Exactly.
Facebook falls in the forest, everybody's
Yeah,
gonna
like
hear
everyone
it.
knows, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. Cool. Okay, I guess I just have some more like general questions about sort of how has like this concept, this word entrepreneurship, which we hear all the time through our involvements at CFE, like how has that actually impacted your life, maybe your perspective, and sort of your larger goals in your career and in your life?
That's a great question. I think entrepreneurship has kind of meant different things to me over the past couple years.
Mhm.
I remember early on with Empowered, for me, entrepreneurship was about the ability to just go out and do something and not have to wait for somebody to give you permission.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, we have this idea for a project, we think that there's a need for this. Let's just make some plans, make some events, like
Mhm.
think about how we'll do this, and let's just start talking to people and see what we can do.
Yeah.
That was really exciting for me because I had always been used to just like following rules, and here's a system, like teacher gives you your homework and tells you to do it.
Right.
And this was kind of like, okay, we're making something for ourselves, like on the side. Like I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And
It's
then
liberating in a sense.
and then like it started to become more about the like the business and work side as you know I got in through ELP for
Mhm.
example. In that class we did a lot of case studies and just talking about why did different businesses do different things and how did that work out for them.
Right.
And that just became really interesting for me to learn about and think about. I think for a long time I kind of assumed that I wanted to work in early stage startups for a long time.
Mhm. Congrats on your recent job acceptance and offer. So where are you going to be working and what are you going to be doing?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to be working at a late stage startup called Snowflake Computing,
Okay.
and I'll be doing a software engineering role there. I'm still actually trying to figure out like how to explain what Snowflake does to people who aren't like really into software stuff,
Mhm.
but it's gonna sound kind of buzzwordy. It's basically like big data stuff in the cloud. I know it's a
Big data stuff in the cloud.
It's a total meme. It's a total meme.
That's cool. Sweet.
But the idea is basically a lot of companies now are collecting a lot more data than they have in the past,
Mhm.
and using that data effectively requires you to store it like in an efficient way. If it's like really hard to get to all your data, you
Mhm.
can't really use it for any kind of like business insights.
Okay.
And so the way it used to be was if you wanted to have like an enormous amount of data, you would probably get like a little data center
Mhm.
where you would have a bunch of computers and you would just store all your stuff there on
Mhm.
site, and then you would use somebody's database technology to like organize
Right.
that stuff. And so the reason people have been shifting to doing it in the cloud is it basically means you don't have to own all that equipment yourself, or like you don't have to lease some like data center space from somebody else who has all those computers.
Got it.
And so what Snowflake is doing is basically saying you don't have to worry about what cloud platform you're on. So maybe it's on like Amazon AWS or like Google Cloud Platform.
Mhm.
The data itself can be wherever, and Snowflake just does all the managing for the companies. Like, don't worry, your data is somewhere. You don't need to worry about that part. You just
Right.
need to worry about like which
What you
parts
wanna
of that
know.
data are you trying to access and what do you
Cool.
want to do with it. So yeah, basically making it easier for companies to use this like massive amount of data that they have now that they haven't had before.
Cool. So you said it's a late stage startup.
Yep, they did I think a Series F, so like they've
Cool.
been after for a while. They've been running for about 6 years now.
That's awesome. How many
Um,
employees?
It's 400 employees, 115 of that are engineers, and they're trying to double that headcount in about the next year or so.
Oh,
So
cool.
they're like reaching this point
Exciting.
where yeah, they have a lot of traction. Their revenue has been growing a lot,
Mhm.
and then they're just trying to enter this like hyper growth phase
Sweet.
and basically try to make it as like a leader in this space.
That's
So it's like a
awesome.
super exciting time to join, I think.
For sure.
It's gonna be very chaotic, I'm sure, like when the company's trying to double its size.
Mhm.
But I did want to get that experience where I was in a very early stage company where their philosophy was like, let's grow slowly, let's do a stable job, don't raise money, don't sell more equity than we need to.
Mhm.
Kind of just like bootstrapping it.
Right.
And then Facebook is like, well, they don't need to raise any money anymore. They were actually growing quite quickly as well at the
Right.
time I worked there, but not quite to the same degree. And like they knew exactly what their business model was, and it was really
Well
just about like
established.
optimizing small things here and there.
Sure.
So I think Snowflake's somewhere in between. Like
Perfect.
their business is established, but there's gonna be unique challenges in like scaling that up. So there'll still be kind of new problems to work on, and
Sounds exciting.
yeah, I'm super excited.
Cool. What is life balance
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you? And sort of outside of entrepreneurship and school and tech, like, what do you like to do? That
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
thing.
for
How do you
sure.
keep your life balanced?
I think life balance for me is just being able to leave work at work at some
Mhm.
point, and things don't need to like disturb you. So, for example, I guess if you're a founder, I feel like you're kind of on call where if an opportunity related to the company presents itself, you have to jump on it.
Absolutely. Follows you around.
Or like
Yeah.
things come up and it's like, shoot, like I need to get this right now. And even beyond that, even if things aren't going wrong, it's just like, I don't know for sure if I can say this, but I think most founders are working like really long hours, and for me that just didn't feel like something I was willing to do right now.
Right.
So if I could keep it in like 40 to 45 a week, that
Mhm.
seems pretty reasonable. Beyond that, I would be a little iffy.
Sure.
Um,
So that 40 to 45 hours you're at work, how do
Mhm.
you spend the rest of your time? What do you like to do?
yeah, I mean, lately I've been really into music stuff, so I've
Mhm.
been writing some music myself, and like I'm learning to DJs from some friends.
That's it.
And so that's something I would want to get good enough at to like perform one day.
Mhm.
I think that would be super cool. And then
Yeah.
outside of that, I have a bunch of books I've been meaning to read that
Mhm.
I just haven't yet. So like I have this problem where I go to bookstores and like I buy books and then I don't read them for like a super long time.
I have that same
And you have this like
problem.
backlist of books you want to read that just
Yep.
keeps growing. So that list is something I'm hoping to get back to soon as well. Okay.
So, how well would you say that you know yourself?
I would say pretty well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say like I'm pretty introspective in general,
Mhm.
and so a lot of times I'll like notice myself behaving certain ways, and I'll get curious about it. Be like, why did you do that? Like,
Mhm.
what does that say about like how are you thinking about this? So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of hard to be specific, but
Mhm. What's the last thing that's kept you up at night?
last thing that's kept me up at night, huh?
And it doesn't have to be deep. It could be like anything.
I don't know, just like thinking about school ending. So I'm on the last month now. December 17th is my last exam, and then I'm done. So
Oh, you're graduating a semester
yeah.
early.
So like kind of when the semester started, I was like, oh, school's ending. Like, how do you feel about that? You know? And then every couple weeks, it's like just changed a little bit.
Yeah.
It's kind of the point it's at now is like ready or not, it's gonna happen. So
Right.
just trying to enjoy my time, but
Cool.
it's kind of freaky.
Yeah.
It's exciting and very freaky for sure.
Definitely must feel like a really important time.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
But yeah, that's what
Cool.
I'm up to.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
So if you were to colonize Mars, so you and a group of people, okay, however big,
Okay.
you're like the leader, you're in charge, you get to make the rules or no rules,
Oh
okay?
wow.
What is one thing on that is currently like an institution, a law, whatever on Earth that you would absolutely not include in this
Okay.
new colony on Mars?
Oh man, there's so many things wrong. There's for sure a lot of things that we do on Earth that we could do better.
Yeah.
One that I've been thinking a lot about lately is just environmental things. I
Mhm.
think have been getting more attention, and like I've started to be thinking about it more, and just
Yeah.
like certain things like I don't know the way industries are and like the amount of plastic we use and everything,
Totally.
or like not only plastic but just like other materials or practices that aren't super sustainable. Like I think
Right.
if we were gonna start fresh with a new chunk of dirt in space,
Lots of stuff.
like let's try to keep the pollution down. I
Right.
would say it's like
Absolutely.
a clear one.
Super important. It's a good answer.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been
Yeah.
a good
Thanks for
conversation.
having me over, and yeah, I don't know. Do I say bye to the camera or something?